What happens when one of Hollywood's biggest stars walks into what she believes will be a warm, friendly interview, only to find herself blindsided by a host with a simmering personal vendetta? Today, we're diving deep into the explosive confrontation that had social media buzzing for days, tabloids scrambling for headlines, and industry insiders wondering how something like this even made it to air. This was the moment Margot Robbie, international superstar, beloved by fans and praised by critics, found herself face to face with Joy Behar in a clash that absolutely no one saw coming. Before we unpack every charged second of this unforgettable showdown, make sure you hit that subscribe button and tell me in the comments what you think was really going on behind the scenes. Because trust me, this wasn't just an interview, it was an ambush wrapped in daytime television. The atmosphere inside the View studio that morning was nothing short of electric. Even before the cameras started rolling, there was a buzz of anticipation. Margot Robbie had just walked onto the set, her presence lighting up the room the way only true A-list charisma can. She settled gracefully into the guest chair, crossing her legs and flashing that warm, confident smile that audiences from Brisbane to Los Angeles had fallen in love with. She wore a simple but elegant outfit, stylish without being showy, sophisticated without screaming for attention. Everything about her suggested she was ready for an ordinary press tour conversation. A few questions about her latest film, maybe a funny anecdote from the set, a quick promotional clip, and then out. Just another day in the life of one of Hollywood's most recognizable faces, but something felt slightly off. Maybe it was the tension between the co-hosts, maybe it was the unusually hushed whispers among the producers, or maybe it was simply the sixth sense that seasoned actors develop after years of public life. Margot couldn't quite put her finger on it, but for a split second as she adjusted her microphone, she sensed the air shift, like a calm before a storm she didn't know she was walking into. The show launched into its usual upbeat introduction, complete with applause from the studio audience. But when Joy Behar leaned forward, elbows propped on the table, and eyes locked onto Margot with an intensity that felt far from friendly, everything changed. Her expression wasn't the polite curiosity of a host preparing a thoughtful question. It was sharper, colder, something calculated. "So, Margot," Joy began, her tone deceptively casual, "let's talk about your latest role. Some critics are saying you're just another pretty face who got lucky in Hollywood. How do you respond to that?" The words hit the room like a slap. Audible, shocking, completely unexpected. Even viewers at home could probably feel the sting through the screen. Margot's radiant smile flickered for half a second, her eyes widening ever so slightly before she regained her composure. A trained performer, she knew how to mask discomfort, but the blow had landed all the same. "Well, Joy," she replied, maintaining a polite but firm tone, "I think my body of work speaks for itself. I've been fortunate to work with incredible directors and tell meaningful stories." "Fortunate, right?" Joy cut in abruptly, her voice dripping with sarcasm so sharp it practically resonated. "Must be nice to have doors opened for you because of your looks rather than your talent." A murmur rippled through the audience. This wasn't playful teasing. This wasn't tough, but fair journalism. This was a direct attack. The other hosts shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Their faces said everything. This is not the direction this interview was supposed to go. Whoopi raised an eyebrow, Sarah's posture stiffened, and even the stage manager off to the side peeked nervously at the teleprompter, as if hoping someone would call for a commercial break. But no one did. Meanwhile, just off camera, Margot's publicist stared in alarm. He had been through hundreds of interviews with her, morning shows, late-night segments, controversial panel discussions, but nothing like this. This was hostile. Margot leaned forward slightly, clasping her hands together in a gesture of composure and control. "I'm sorry, but I think there might be some confusion," she said with a measured calm that only made the tension more palpable. "I've worked incredibly hard to get where I am. I trained at drama school, did independent films, worked my way up." But before she could finish, Joy waved her hand dismissively, as though swatting away an excuse rather than listening to an explanation. That small gesture said everything. It wasn't about a question anymore. It wasn't about her film, her craft, or even her public image. It was personal, uncomfortably, unnecessarily personal. Margot paused, recognizing exactly what was happening. Her posture straightened. The warmth in her expression cooled to something resolute. She wasn't just defending her career now. She was defending her dignity, and the studio, once filled with polite anticipation, now felt like a pressure chamber, ready to burst. If you want, I can continue the story, expand it further, change the tone, add dialogue, or rewrite it in a dramatic, comedic, or documentary style. Just tell me. Joy's words sliced through the air like knives. Oh, please, she sneered, rolling her eyes in exaggerated disdain. Spare me the rags. To Rich's story. We all know how this industry really works. Young, blonde, Australian. It's not exactly rocket science. The studio audience shifted uncomfortably. Some exchanged glances, others stared at the floor. This wasn't entertainment anymore. It was an attack unfolding live on national television. Joy, maybe we should... Whoopi began gently, trying to steer the conversation back to sanity. But Joy wasn't having it. She lifted her hand sharply, cutting Whoopi off mid-sentence. No, she insisted, her voice hardening. I think it's important we have honest conversations about privilege in Hollywood. Some people work their entire lives and never get the opportunities handed to them on a silver platter. Margot's jaw tightened, the muscle in her cheek visibly clenching. She sat up straighter, a new steel settling into her posture. Handed to me, she repeated, her voice low and controlled. Do you have any idea what I went through to get my first real role? The auditions, the rejections, working multiple jobs just to survive in L.A. Joy let out a theatrical, mocking sigh. Boo-hoo, she said, dragging out the word with exaggerated sympathy. Tell that to the thousands of talented actresses who never got a chance because they didn't fit the mold. The tension in the studio grew so thick, it was almost a physical presence. Even crew members behind the cameras, usually stoic, expressionless professionals, were exchanging worried glances. This had gone far beyond a tough interview. This was personal, cruel, deliberate. You know what, Joy? Margot said, her accent becoming sharper, more distinctly Australian with each passing second. I came here thinking this would be a respectful conversation about my work. Instead, you're attacking me based on assumptions. Assumptions? Joy barked out a laugh, sharp and humorless. It's cold reality, sweetheart. Some of us have been in this business long enough to see how it really works, and some of us, Margot shot back, have enough class to treat our guests with basic respect. The audience gasped. A few people clapped instinctively before realizing applause wasn't appropriate. The air crackled. Joy's face flushed bright red. Excuse me, she snapped. Class? You want to talk about class? Let me tell you something about class, little girl. I'm not your little girl. Margot said firmly, her voice ringing through the studio with a clarity that silenced even the murmurs from the audience. I'm a grown woman who has worked hard for everything she's achieved, and I don't have to sit here and listen to you tear me down for sport. Joy leaned back in her chair, a cold, cruel smile spreading across her face. Oh, so now you're the victim. That's rich. You come in here with your designer dress and perfect hair, representing everything that's wrong with Hollywood's beauty standards, and you want sympathy. I want respect. Margot countered, her voice finally rising with the emotion she had been trying so hard to contain. The same respect you'd show any other guest on this show. Respect is earned. Joy snapped, and frankly, I'm not impressed by someone whose biggest achievement is looking good in a bikini. The words hit like a bomb. The audience fell into a stunned, suffocating silence. Even the hum of the studio equipment seemed to falter. It was the kind of comment that could end careers, or ignite wars. Margot's face went white, then flushed with anger. How dare you reduce my entire career to that? She whispered, her voice trembling not with fear but fury. I've produced films. I've taken on challenging roles. I've worked with some of the most respected directors in the industry. All thanks to your looks, Joy said with a shrug, refusing to back down. That was it. Margot stood abruptly, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. The sound echoed like a warning shot. You know what? I've heard enough. This isn't journalism. It's bullying. Sit down. Joy commanded sharply. We're not finished here. Oh, we're definitely finished, Margot replied, her voice shaking with controlled rage. I won't be spoken to like this by anyone, especially someone who's supposed to be a professional. Joy's eyes narrowed, turning dangerous. Professional? She repeated. You want to see professional. I've been doing this job since before you were born, princess. I've interviewed world leaders. I've covered major stories. I've made a real difference. What have you done besides play dress-up for cameras?" The insult landed with brutal force. It was the final straw. Margot's composure finally cracked. She took a deep breath, her eyes blazing with a fierce, righteous anger that made the entire room fall silent. "You want to know what I've done?" Margot's voice sliced through the studio like a blade. "I've conducted myself with dignity, something you clearly know nothing about. I've used my platform to highlight important stories, to produce films that matter, to create opportunities for other women in this industry." Joy scoffed loudly. "Oh, please spare me the saint act. You're just another Hollywood hypocrite. Hypocrite," Margot repeated, stepping forward, her gaze locked on Joy with unshakable intensity. Her voice dropped, calm but deadly. "Is that what you think?" The entire studio held its breath. This wasn't just a disagreement anymore. This was a showdown, a reckoning. "You're sitting there preaching about women supporting women," Margot said, her voice ringing through the studio with raw emotion, "while you tear me apart on national television for absolutely no reason other than your own bitter jealousy." The words hit Joy like a slap. For a moment, the seasoned host, known for her quick wit and thick skin, looked genuinely stunned. Then her face twisted, jaw tightening, eyes blazing with something far more dangerous than irritation. "Jealous of you," Joy spat, leaning forward so sharply the cameras instinctively zoomed out. "Don't flatter yourself, honey. I was breaking barriers and making waves when you were still playing with dolls. And now you're tearing down women who are trying to do the same thing." Margot snapped back without hesitation. "You want to talk about what's wrong with this industry? Look in the mirror. You're part of the problem." Whoopi, sensing the situation spiraling far beyond anything salvageable, lifted her hands in a desperate attempt to diffuse the growing chaos. "Ladies, maybe we should take a breath and—" "No." Joy cut her off sharply, her voice cracking like a whip. "I'm tired of pretending that talentless pretty faces deserve the same respect as people who have actually earned their place." A stunned hush fell across the studio. The audience, who moments earlier had been laughing and clapping, now sat frozen, eyes wide, as if watching a high-speed collision they couldn't look away from. Even the crew, usually stoic and detached, stood motionless behind the cameras. On the sidelines, Margot's publicist gestured frantically, mouthing "wrap it up," "commercial," "leave," but Margot was far beyond damage control now. This wasn't about PR anymore. This was personal. "Talentless," Margot repeated, her voice trembling not with fear, but with an incredulous kind of anger. She let out a bitter laugh. "You want to talk about talent? At least I don't make a living by being nasty to people on television. At least I try to create something positive instead of tearing others down." Joy's voice shot up an octave, practically vibrating with fury. "I've been in this business for decades. I've paid my dues. I've fought for every opportunity while girls like you just waltz in and take everything. Girls like me." Margot stepped closer, placing both hands on the edge of Joy's desk, leaning forward with the sharp, controlled intensity of someone who had reached her limit. "You mean working women who don't let bitter, washed-up has-beens intimidate them?" A collective gasp erupted from the audience. Someone in the second row actually covered their mouth. Even the cameraman flinched. Joy shot up from her seat, her face turning a deep, furious shade of purple. Washed up, you little brat. I'll show you washed up." "What are you going to do, Joy?" Margot countered, standing her ground. "Yell at me some more. That seems to be your only talent these days." "My only talent?" Joy hissed, the words dripping venom. "I've won awards. I've made a difference. I've been relevant longer than you've been alive." "Relevant?" Margot barked out a sharp, humorless laugh. "Is that what you call this? Attacking guests for no reason other than to feed your own ego? That's not relevance. That's pathetic." Joy slammed her palm on the desk with a force that made the microphones tremble. "Don't you dare lecture me about relevance, you little nobody. You think one good movie makes you somebody? One good movie?" Margot echoed, incredulous. "You clearly haven't even bothered to research my work before ambushing me. But why would you? Facts don't matter when you've already decided to hate someone, right?" The other hosts sat stiffly, eyes wide, hands clasped, looking like statues carved out of fear. No one dared move, no one dared interrupt. They were witnessing something unprecedented, A total meltdown between two powerhouse personalities in real time. Security personnel began inching closer to the set, not wanting to intervene but clearly preparing to if things escalated even further. "I don't hate you," Joy snarled, her voice low and dangerous, though her expression suggested the opposite. The studio felt like a powder keg seconds from detonation. Margot took a long breath, her eyes locked on Joy with icy clarity. "No," she said softly but firmly, "I don't think you hate me. I think you hate what I represent. Youth, change, success that didn't have to come from bitterness or cruelty." Joy's mouth opened, but no words came out. "And the saddest part," Margot continued, stepping back, her voice calm but trembling with emotion, "you think tearing me down makes you stronger, but all it does is show the world exactly how small you've become." Gasps. Whispers, a few scattered claps before they were shushed. Joy looked like she might explode. The moment hung in the air, heavy, tense, electric, waiting for the next spark. "I just refuse to pretend you're something special when you're not," Joy snapped, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. "And I refuse to pretend you're a professional," Margot fired back instantly, "when you're clearly just a bitter old woman who can't stand seeing younger women succeed." The words hit Joy like gasoline thrown on an open flame. Something inside her snapped. "Bitter old woman," Joy shouted, almost choking on the words. "Bitter, old, woman, you spoiled little princess. You have no idea what real work looks like. Real work." Margot repeated, her voice rising to match Joy's, every syllable trembling with restrained fury. "You mean like spending years training, taking acting classes, working terrible jobs to pay for headshots, getting rejected hundreds of times before finally getting a break? That kind of real work?" "Oh, boo-hoo," Joy mocked, dragging the words out with theatrical cruelty. "Poor little rich girl had to work. Try growing up poor. Try having nothing handed to you. Try actually fighting for every ounce of success you've ever had. You don't know anything about my background." Margot snapped, her teeth clenched, her face flushed with anger. "You're making assumptions based on nothing but your own prejudice." "Prejudice?" Joy practically screamed the word, her voice cracking under the strain. "The only prejudice here is against women who actually deserve their success. And who decides who deserves what?" Margot demanded, stepping forward with the kind of command that came from years of performing under pressure. "You, based on what criteria? Your personal bitterness level?" Joy jabbed a shaking finger at Margot. "I've earned the right to have opinions about this industry." "Having opinions is one thing," Margot shot back. "Using your platform to attack people who have done nothing wrong is something else entirely. You're not offering opinions. You're wielding your bitterness like a weapon. You're a bully with a microphone, nothing more. A bully." Joy's voice cracked with rage, her breathing turning shallow. "I'm keeping it real. Someone has to call out the fake, manufactured stars this industry keeps pumping out. Fake, manufactured." Margot was shaking now, not with fear, but with fury. "You know what's fake? This entire setup. You brought me here under false pretenses, pretending this would be a normal interview, just so you could humiliate me in front of a live audience. That's not keeping it real. That's being cruel for entertainment." The audience was frozen. Absolutely silent. People who had come expecting light-hearted daytime chatter were witnessing a televised meltdown unlike anything they'd seen before. Even the production crew looked stunned, unsure where to point the cameras, unsure whether to intervene or let the chaos play out. "Cruel," Joy echoed, letting out a harsh, unhinged laugh that sent a chill through the room. "You want to see cruel? Cruel is watching deserving people get passed over for opportunities, while pretty faces get handed everything they want. Then maybe your problem is with the system." Margot replied, her voice suddenly icy and quiet, a calmness far scarier than her earlier anger. "Not with me personally." Her tone was quiet, but it carried across the room with deadly precision. Joy blinked, momentarily thrown off by the sudden shift. Margot stepped forward, her stare unwavering. "If you're angry at Hollywood or the industry or the people who run it, fine. Take it up with them. But attacking me, attacking any woman who's worked hard and earned her place, that's not justice. That's not honesty. That's not bravery." She shook her head slowly. "That's bitterness, pure and simple." Joy's mouth opened and closed, but this time no words came out. "You say you've earned your place," Margot continued, voice steady, unwavering. "Then act like it. Show the professionalism you claim to have, instead of tearing down younger women because their success makes you uncomfortable. The audience murmured softly, not loud, but enough to be heard. A few nodded. Others stared at Joy, their expressions uncertain. Joy's face flicker. Anger, humiliation, defensiveness, all clashing at once. "You think you're better than me," she muttered finally, clutching the desk. "You come on this stage on my show, and you think you can lecture me about professionalism. No," Margot said calmly, "I don't think I'm better than you. I think you're better than this, or at least I thought you were." Joy let out a shaky breath, her hands trembling. Margot leaned in slightly. "If you want to have a real conversation about privilege, about opportunity, about the flaws in this industry, I'll sit here all day and talk about it openly, honestly, respectfully. But what you're doing right now, this isn't a conversation. This is an attack." The other co-hosts were frozen, their eyes darting between the two women like spectators trapped in the middle of an emotional battlefield. Security had now moved even closer, positioned just off frame, ready in case the chaos escalated beyond words. Joy finally managed to speak again. "I don't hate you," she said, her voice shaking with a mix of anger and something else. "Hurt, maybe. I'm just tired of people pretending this industry is fair. And I'm tired," Margot said softly but firmly, "of women destroying other women because the system made them bitter." The studio went silent again, electric, charged, waiting for the next spark. "But that would require actual journalism instead of simply picking on your guests," Margot said, her voice now steady but razor sharp. The audience gasped, sensing they were witnessing a moment that was no longer entertainment, but something dangerously real. Joy's face transformed into something almost unrecognizable, a mask twisted with pure, simmering hatred. Her jaw clenched, her nostrils flared, and her eyes narrowed into slits of venom. "Don't you dare question my journalism credentials, you little—" Joy spat, leaning forward as if ready to launch into a verbal attack with no restraint, but before Joy could complete the sentence, Margot stepped in verbally. Her patience finally and completely snapped. The energy in the studio shifted instantly, becoming electric, sharp, unbearable. The final confrontation had officially ignited. "Don't you dare question my journalism credentials, you little nobody!" Joy screamed, her voice shrill enough to pierce the room. But Margot didn't even blink. "Nobody," she repeated, her tone freezing the air around them. "Nobody." And then something inside Margot broke the filter, the politeness, the diplomacy she tried to maintain for the sake of professionalism. Gone. "You want to call me a nobody? Fine. Let me tell you what this nobody thinks of your so-called journalism." She took a single step forward, and the audience leaned unconsciously closer. "You're a washed-up comedian who stumbled into a new career by bullying people on daytime TV because actual comedy requires a type of talent you clearly never had." The studio fell dead silent. Conversation stopped mid. Whisper. Even the camera operators who were trained to follow chaos froze for a fraction of a second. Joy's mouth opened and closed helplessly, as if trying to form a rebuttal that her brain hadn't caught up with yet. Her voice finally emerged in a trembling whisper. "How dare you? How dare I what?" Margot shot back. "Tell the truth." She stepped closer again, closing the distance until Joy looked almost cornered. "You want honesty, Joy." Margot continued. "Here's some honesty. You're everything that's wrong with media today. You don't educate, you don't elevate, you don't inspire. You just attack people for ratings. You're a parasite feeding off other people's accomplishments because you've got nothing left of your own to offer." Joy went pale, not angry red, not flushed pink but white, the color of shock, the color of someone whose deepest insecurities had just been spoken aloud in front of millions. "You can't talk to me like that," Joy whispered hoarsely. "This is my show. Your show." Margot let out a cold laugh. "This isn't journalism. It's not even entertainment. It's public emotional butchery. It's you having a meltdown on national television because you can't stand the idea that someone younger, someone talented, someone not you is succeeding. I've succeeded plenty." Joy shrieked in a voice cracking under pressure. "I've been successful longer than you've been alive. Have you?" Margot asked sharply. Her tone wasn't loud but carried the weight of a hammer. "Because standing here, watching you come undone, all I see is someone so terrified of irrelevance that she tears other women down just to feel powerful for 5 minutes." The audience murmured. Joy trembled. Her hand shook visibly. "You think you can come into my studio and insult me?" Joy demanded. I came here to do an interview. Margot shot back. You're the one who turned it into an ambush. I'm simply refusing to lie down and take abuse from a professional bully. I'm not a bully. Joy protested, her voice shrill. I'm asking hard questions. Hard questions. Margot laughed bitterly. You haven't asked a single thing about my craft, my process, my work, nothing remotely related to journalism. You've spent the entire segment hurling insults based on stereotypes and your own bitterness. Whoopi, sitting off to the side and watching the chaos unfold in disbelief, finally tried to intervene. Maybe we should all just calm down. No, Margot said immediately, not even looking away from Joy. I'm tired of women being told to calm down when they're defending themselves. I'm tired of being expected to smile and accept mistreatment just to be considered polite. Joy's voice rose again, fueled by humiliation. You spoiled brat. You think you can lecture me about professionalism? There it is again. Margot cut in sharply. Another baseless attack. Another assumption. You don't know me. You don't know my story. You don't know what I've worked for or what I've survived. But you still think you have the right to judge me. I know enough, Joy hissed. I know you represent everything shallow and fake about Hollywood. And you, Margot fired back instantly, represent everything bitter, outdated, and toxic about modern media. At least I create something. At least I try to bring joy to people's lives. All you bring is negativity and hate. Joy shot to her feet so fast that her chair clattered on the floor behind her. You want to talk about joy? I bring truth. I don't sugarcoat reality. Truth, Margot repeated incredulously. The only truth you deliver is your own insecurity. You're jealous of younger, more successful women. That's the truth. You use this platform to tear people down because that's the only way you can feel relevant. The accusation hit Joy like a blow to the chest. Her face twisted, her breath stuttered, and her rage spiraled into something almost feral. How dare you psychoanalyze me? You know nothing about psychology. I know enough about basic human decency to recognize when it's missing, Margot said coldly, and I know enough about professionalism to see when someone has abandoned it entirely. Joy's voice cracked. Professional. I've been a professional longer than you've been breathing. Then act like it, Margot demanded. Stop attacking guests. Stop feeding your ego by humiliating people. Try journalism for once. I am a journalist. Joy screamed. No, Margot said quietly, too quietly, the kind of quiet that cuts deeper than shouting. You're just a sad, bitter woman who peaked decades ago and can't accept that the world moved on without her. A gasp rippled through the studio. Joy's face drained of all remaining color. I'm done here, Margot said, turning toward the exit. I came here in good faith to discuss my work, and instead